I am a king, said Bran. Will you fight for me if I stand at the tip of your fight wedge? A king of our own race, said Wolfhair doggedly. We are all picked men of the north. We fight for none but a king, and a king must lead us against the legions. Cormac sensed a subtle threat in this repeated phrase. Here is a prince of Erin, said Bran. Will you fight for the Westerner? We fight for no Celt, west or east, growled the Viking, and a low rumble of approval rose from the onlookers. It is enough to fight by their side. The hot Gaelic blood rose in Cormac's brain, and he pushed past Bran, his hand on his sword. How mean you that, pirate? Before Wolfhair could reply, Bran interposed. Have done! Will you fools throw away the battle before it is fought by your madness? What of your oath, Wolfhair? We swore it under Ragnar. When he died from a Roman arrow, we were absolved of it. We will follow only a king against the legions. But your comrades will follow you against the hither people, snapped Bran. Aye. The Northman's eyes met his brazenly. Send us a king, or we join the Romans tomorrow. That tense moment is from the story Kings of the Night by Robert E. Howard, a fantastic classic tale that you can find in this collection, Bran Mac Morn, the Last King. Welcome, my friends, welcome to stately Vaughan Manor and the Robert E. Howard Show. It is the Robert E. Howard Show once again. And today we're continuing to talk about Bran Mac Morn, the King of the Picts, a creation of Robert E. Howard, one of his famous characters, Bran Mac Morn. Not a character that appeared in many stories, but the few stories he showed up in, he was really memorable. And that includes this great story, Kings of the Night. Kings of the Night, a great bonus story because out of the distant past, out of the pre-cataclysmic era comes King Kull. Kull, the king of Valusia, travels into the distant future, well, his distant future, to fight alongside Bran Mac Morn against the Roman legions. So there's a lot of stuff going on in this story. It's awful good, I'll tell you. It is basically a straightforward story about a battle. And the action in this is fantastic. Great action in this and really good character work as well. This story is the second Bran Mac Morn story. Actually, the first Bran Mac Morn story, which is in this volume and precedes it, is a story called Men of the Shadows. Now, Men of the Shadows was never published during Robert E. Howard's lifetime. I can kind of see why. It's not a bad story at all. And it does serve well as an introduction to the character of Bran Mac Morn. But as a story, it does have some failings. A lot of exposition, for one thing. Like I said, as an introduction to this character, it's excellent. And it is a bit moody in its own right. But the moodiness cranks up in the second story because, of course, we know that all of these people that are fighting against Rome, no matter what the outcome of today's battle is, they are doomed to fail. Sadly, they are, and we know that just from history. But on this day, Bran Mac Morn, who was merely a chief, he was just a chief to begin with. He was a son of a Wolf Clan tribe chief. And he has gathered together all the different tribes of Picts to fight together against the Roman legions. And in so doing, he has made himself a king of a Pictish nation. But as this Pictish nation is just starting, it will be brought down by Rome eventually. Now, alongside of Bran Mac Morn, we get some other characters. The main character in this story, other than Bran Mac Morn is the main character, and other than Kull, is actually the point of view character. The character whose point of view, who we're seeing these events happen through, is a character called Cormac of Connacht. And he's fighting alongside the Picts to keep the Romans from conquering all of Britain. And in this story, there are some unruly Britons who had originally agreed to fight alongside the Picts. But when their king died, when he was killed by that Roman arrow, they're like, nah, man, we're not fighting the Romans. That seems a little, nah, we're not going to do that. The only way we're going to do that is to give us a king that ain't you. Which seems, you know, impossible, but magic. This is a weird tale story after all. And these Bran Mac Morn stories, even though they take place in the historical past, they were fantasies. These are fantasy stories and horror stories, if you count the next one. But they're definitely fantasy stories. Magic exists. Magic in Robert E. Howard tended to be scary magic for the most part, but this time it's pretty helpful because out of the dim past is brought Kull of Valusia. King Kull makes his return in this story. Just shows up through magic, looks around like, where the hell am I? He's convinced through the whole story that he's just dreaming this whole thing. But he's like, you know what? Don't matter. It's real to me now. I'm with you. I'm going to fight these Romans, whoever the hell they are. So Kull is brought out of the past. And this is frightening and bewildering to our main cast of characters, but they go along with it because they need this. They need Kull to take charge. So, you know, of course they bring Kull over and say, hey, here's a king, fight for him. And they're like, what? We don't know who this guy is. So there's a big fight. And, you know, Kull kicks some ass. And after that, they're like, okay, just, you know, don't kill us. We'll fight for you. We'll fight for you, Kull, whoever the hell you are. So, yeah. So they fight, and there's a lot of great stuff in this story. The way it's written is really exciting. This is Robert E. Howard at his best writing adventure. And it's interesting because we finally get to see Kull, who we had followed through all of those Kull stories. Finally, he gets to lead a group of men in battle. So finally, we get to see him in a real fight, and boy, it pays off. Let me tell you. So that is fun. And in a way, Kull almost overshadows Bran Mac Morn. Almost. But the whole pathos of the whole situation. And Bran Mac Morn is such a strong character. And he seems like a real guy with real concerns. And he has to make really tough decisions, which is one of the things you'll find in the Bran Mac Morn stories. This one and the next one, where Bran Mac Morn, because he needs to accomplish what he needs to accomplish, he has to make tough decisions and he has to make some tough sacrifices, as you need to when you are both a king and a general, about to fight this great battle against Rome. And so that's really interesting. This is a really interesting study of his character. And every time he's talking or every time he's on the scene, it's really interesting. Because you get the sense that, very clearly, that he understands perfectly the odds against him. He knows he's probably fighting a losing battle, that this is a lost cause. But he has to fight it. He has to do his best. He has to fight against Rome, against all the odds. And it's one of those stories that talks about something that you see a lot in Robert E. Howard, which is the lost cause. No matter how successful you are in life, you'll lose it all eventually. And even if you live a great life, eventually you're going to die. And not only that, you will be forgotten. King Kull, the greatest king of his era, is all but forgotten now. Only people that remember him are a few wizards here and there and people who know about the ancient lore, and that's not many. Pretty much his whole world is forgotten. Everything that he ever accomplished is meaningless now. Such is the fate of us all, this story suggests. And so it has that brooding darkness over the whole thing, which adds atmosphere. And the story itself is tremendously interesting, entertaining. It's fun to see all these guys finally in this big fight against Rome. And I highly recommend it. This actually is, I think, one of Robert E. Howard's best stories. And I'm not going to talk any more about it because I think you ought to read it, Kings of the Night, because it is fantastic, trust me. I mean, it's worth getting this book alone for that story. And there's some awful good stuff in this book. One of which we'll be talking about next week, Worms of the Earth, which could be one of the greatest Robert E. Howard stories, if not the greatest Robert E. Howard story ever written. So it's a doozy. We'll talk about that next time. Be sure to catch me tomorrow. Roger will be back at the manor tomorrow. He's been out buying books or something. That guy, he's always out buying books. He's got a problem. So anyway, catch me tomorrow for Halls of Adventure, and I will see you next time.